They laughed at a man they thought was broke. They didn't know he owned their lives. My name is Gabriel Stone, and this isn't a Christmas story about love or family. This is a story about what happens when silence becomes power. A story of family betrayal, revenge served cold, and a truth so sharp it froze an entire ballroom at the Scottsdale Country Club. I remember that night vividly, the glow of the 18-foot Christmas tree, champagne flutes, clinking the sound of silent night echoing across polished marble floors. Guests in glittering gowns and $5,000 tuxedos laughed too loudly, pretending to care. And then there was me sitting quietly at the edge of the room in a $45 shirt from Target, watching my own daughter shine under the chandeliers. Samantha Stone, 29, beautiful, confident, and completely unaware that every inch of her luxury life was built on the money she thought no longer existed. She called herself self-made, influencer, independent woman. But the truth, she'd been living for years on a fortune I controlled, one that her late grandmother, Margaret Stone, left behind and trusted me to protect. That night, she raised her glass and said, "Some people create value, others just exist." The room laughed. Even my ex-wife, Laura, smiled. Her new husband, Richard Coleman, smirked like a man who believed he'd won something. I didn't speak. I didn't argue. I just sat there and listened the way I had for years, because real power doesn't shout. It waits. As the laughter filled the air, I could feel something shift inside me, that quiet, steady burn of truth demanding to be seen. Every cruel word, every fake compliment, every lie wrapped in family love, they had been rehearsing it for years. The country club applause hid their contempt. The holiday smiles hid their greed. And in that moment, I understood exactly what Margaret meant when she whispered before she died. Teach her gratitude even if it breaks her heart. This isn't just a family drama. It's a revenge story, a power of silence story about how one father turned humiliation into justice without ever raising his voice. When the truth came out, it didn't explode, it froze. Phones started buzzing, credit cards stopped working, and the people who laughed were suddenly silent. But before that moment came, I sat there holding a glass of cheap red wine, pretending not to notice their stares. They thought I was irrelevant. They thought I was weak. They were wrong. Because on that Christmas night, I didn't lose my dignity, I took back control. They say betrayal doesn't always come with knives. Sometimes it comes with hugs and champagne. That night inside the grand ballroom of the Scottsdale Country Club, I watched my daughter, Samantha Stone, give a speech that carved through me deeper than any blade could. She stood under the glow of chandeliers, her voice confident, rehearsed, dripping with the arrogance of someone who had never known humility. People adored her. She talked about the power of independence, how she had built her success from nothing, how she was the proof that hard work pays off. Every word was a lie, and every lie was built on money I had quietly transferred to her for years. I sat 3 tables away, invisible among the laughter. Laura, my ex-wife, looked radiant in her emerald gown, a color she always wore when she wanted to look richer. Beside her, Richard Coleman, the man she married after me, leaned back in his chair, a satisfied smirk painted on his face. He raised a glass every time Samantha mentioned discipline, vision, or leadership. He loved pretending he was part of her success story. The irony was almost poetic. For 10 years, I had wired the same amount each month, $12,000. Every tuition bill, every apartment rent, every BMW payment, every spa weekend, I paid them all. Not for gratitude, but because my mother, Margaret Stone, had asked me to. Her words before she passed still echo in my mind. Let her believe she earned it. But if she forgets where it came from, remind her gently, if you can, firmly, if you must. That night, I knew the gentle part was over. The betrayal didn't start with that speech. It started months earlier with the phone calls that stopped the texts left on, read the slow fade from Dad to Gabriel. It started with the way Laura began to introduce me as Samantha's biological father, like I was a stranger who'd once signed a birth certificate. It started when Samantha invited everyone to the Christmas gala except me, until the club's director, an old friend of mine, noticed my absence and added me to the guest list out of pity. When I arrived, Samantha's smile faltered. "Oh, you came," she said, her tone somewhere between surprise and disappointment. "Richard gave me that patronizing half hug people give the help." "You clean up well, Gabe." He chuckled. Laura added, "I told him to dress festive." I looked down at my simple gray shirt, $45 from Target, and nodded. "This is festive for me." They laughed, and something in me, something buried for years, shifted. The night unfolded like a performance choreographed to humiliate me. The way Richard clinked his glass before boasting about our family's trust fund management. The way Laura smiled for every photo, placing her manicured hand on my daughter's shoulder, as if she'd built this empire herself. Samantha gave out gift bags with her initials embossed in gold. She even gave one to me saying, "Just a little something from my brand, you might like it." Inside was a cologne labeled Legacy. I nearly laughed. Then came the moment that burned itself into my memory. Richard leaned in across the table loud enough for the nearby guests to hear. "So Gabe, I hear you're still between jobs." The way he said it, casual, polite, weaponized, drew soft laughter from around the table. Laura chimed in. "He's always been too smart for the wrong things." Samantha didn't defend me. She didn't even look my way. She just raised her glass and said, "Some people create value. Others just exist." The room erupted in laughter. Cameras flashed. Waiters poured more champagne. And I just sat there silent, feeling the sting of 10 years of sacrifice dissolve into nothing but embarrassment. I thought of all the late nights balancing spreadsheets, cutting corners on my own life so she could live hers. I remembered selling my mother's old watch to cover Samantha's first semester of grad school. I remembered the way she used to hug me saying, "You're my hero." Now I was just the old man in the cheap shirt. I didn't need to check my bank app to know how much I had left. I knew every cent. The trust fund Margaret had left was now $8.3 million, growing silently untouched except for the distributions I approved. Samantha thought it was endless automatic. She thought her grandmother's wealth was her birthright, not a choice I made each month. Beatrice Monroe sat across the room watching me. She'd been Margaret's best friend, sharp as ever in her 70s, and she knew the truth about the fund. She caught my eye and gave me the smallest nod, the kind that says it's time. But I didn't move. I wasn't ready to turn the night into a spectacle. Not yet. I wanted her to finish her fairy tale. I wanted the whole room to hear it, the illusion of the self-made woman, the perfect daughter, the happy family. I wanted them to applaud her story one last time before I shattered it. Inside my mind was a storm. I thought about Margaret's voice again, that calm wisdom she carried until the end. Silence. Gabriel is not surrender. It's a strategy. So I stayed silent. I smiled. I clapped when everyone clapped. But inside I began counting the minutes, counting down to the moment when truth would replace performance. Because that's the thing about betrayal, it doesn't destroy the strong. It wakes them up. And that night, surrounded by laughter, luxury, and lies, I woke up completely. People think the worst betrayals happen in anger, but the cruelest ones happen while everyone's smiling. That night at the Scottsdale Country Club, the illusion of family looked picture perfect. The air smelled like cinnamon and champagne, the jazz trio played softly, and everywhere I looked, people performed, affection like it was theater. My family was the star act. Laura was the first to spot me crossing the ballroom. She waved with that rehearsed grace she learned from years of pretending. Gabriel, she called out, her tone sugary enough to rot teeth. "You made it after all." Her husband, Richard Coleman, stood beside her, tan, and polished a Rolex flashing under the chandelier. He placed a hand on my shoulder, firm and claiming. "Good to see you, Gabe," he said as if greeting an employee he pitied. "Can we get you a drink? The bar's open. Try the 12-year-old scotch." I declined politely. He poured one anyway. Laura's arm slipped around my back, that fake closeness she saved for public moments. "How have you been holding up?" she asked, tilting her head. Samantha told me it's been challenging. Her pause was theatrical. Everything about her was theater, the gown, the laugh, the way she said my name, only when people were listening. Before I could answer, Samantha appeared. Red silk dress, diamond earrings, catching the light phone in hand, recording herself for a holiday vlog. She kissed my cheek for the camera. "This is my dad," she said, turning the lens on me. "The man who taught me hard work." The room applauded. I smiled for the camera because that's what props do. After the applause faded, Samantha's voice dropped to a whisper. "Dad, can you stand by the dessert table for a few minutes? The lighting's better there for my shots." Her tone was polite but dismissive, the way people talk to someone they want out of frame. I stepped aside holding my untouched drink, watching as she filmed herself laughing with Laura and Richard. To everyone else, they looked like the American dream, the successful daughter, the supportive parents, the perfect life. Only I knew that behind those smiles were years of manipulation and control. I had financed every sparkle in that diamond, every thread in that dress, every sip of that champagne. They knew it too. They just pretended not to. Richard raised his glass again. To Samantha Stone, proof that good breeding and smart investments pay off. Everyone laughed. Laura kissed Samantha's cheek, whispering, "You make us so proud, sweetheart." Us. She said it like I wasn't standing right there. I was the invisible man in the photograph, the shadow cropped out before posting. When dinner was served, I was seated at the far end of the table, not beside family, but beside the event planner and a couple from the finance board who didn't know who I was. Across the long centerpiece of white roses and gold candles, I watched the three of them, Laura, Richard, and Samantha, clinking glasses, smiling for pictures. The flashes kept going off, like fireworks, freezing fake joy into digital memories. Laura occasionally looked my way, always with that pitiful smile. "Gabriel, you must try the sea bass," she called. "It's divine." Her voice floated across the table, light and empty. I nodded, smiled, said nothing. She loved performing kindness in public. It gave her permission to be cruel in private later. At one point, Richard leaned toward me and said loudly enough for nearby guests to hear, "You should see the new kitchen we just installed in Samantha's apartment. Italian marble. Cost a fortune, but she deserves it, right?" He chuckled. I looked at Samantha. She avoided my eyes. She knew who'd paid for that marble. Every inch of her life was purchased by my quiet sacrifice. But in this performance, the truth had no seat at the table. As the meal went on, Laura reached across to touch my hand. "You should come by more often," she said sweetly. "Samantha misses you." I glanced at Samantha. She was scrolling through her phone, posting another story captioned, "Shonakajar's family goals." I wanted to laugh, not out of humor, but disbelief. The woman who hadn't answered my last 7 calls was posting about family love. That's when Beatrice Monroe, sitting 2 tables away, caught my eye again. She gave me a small, knowing smile. Beatrice had been my mother's closest friend. She'd attended every milestone, every holiday, and she knew the truth that I'd been wiring money from Margaret Stone's trust fund into Samantha's accounts for more than a decade. That Laura and Richard had built their family image on top of my silence. The fake affection continued like a script. Laura laughed too loudly at Richard's jokes. Samantha brushed imaginary dust off Richard's sleeve. To outsiders, it looked warm, wholesome even. To me, it felt like standing inside a snow globe, everything sparkling, everything fake, and no air left to breathe. At one point, Samantha wrapped her arm around my shoulders for a photo. "Smile, Dad," she whispered. "Try not to look so serious." I forced a grin. The flash went off. She checked the screen and frowned. "We'll do another one later," she said, turning back to Richard. "Lighting's weird." That was the moment I realized I wasn't even a person to her anymore. I was a prop in her curated world, a background texture for her image of success. While they mingled, I sat quietly, tracing my finger along the rim of my glass, listening. Their words blurred into background noise, new investment brand partnerships, expansion in Miami. All talk of wealth and growth, none of substance. Yet beneath it, I caught something darker, the way Richard talked about streamlining the trust, Laura agreeing that family assets should be consolidated. My chest tightened. They weren't just pretending to own the spotlight. They were planning to take the source of the light itself. That's when I decided the act was over. The fake warmth, the polite humiliation, the smiling daggers, it all served one purpose. They wanted me small, forgettable, powerless. But they had forgotten something Margaret once told me. The louder people laugh, the closer they are to panic. I finished my drink, set it down, and smiled to myself genuinely this time. I'd let them perform their love. I'd let them feel safe, because real revenge doesn't interrupt the show. It waits for the perfect scene to end. That night, the curtain was about to fall, and the applause would turn into silence. Memory has a way of haunting you quietly, like a song you can't turn off. As I sat in that glittering ballroom pretending to laugh at jokes, I didn't find funny pieces of my life, started replaying, moments I had buried under years of restraint. Behind every flash of Samantha's smile, I saw the little girl she once was, running barefoot through our backyard, hair tangled, her voice echoing. "Look, Daddy, I did it all by myself," I used to smile, then proud and blind to what that sentence would one day mean. Now she said it again, only not with innocence but arrogance. "I did it all by myself." The same words, just poisoned by entitlement. That was the night I realized how fragile gratitude really is. It doesn't die in anger, it dies in comfort. As the crowd applauded her speech, my mind drifted backward to the last time I spoke with Margaret Stone, my mother. She was lying in her hospice bed, sunlight spilling across her wrinkled hands. She had lost most of her strength, but her voice was still sharp as ever. "Gabriel," she said, gripping my wrist, "you will be the trustee. Samantha will need you. Not for money, for truth." I remember asking what she meant. She looked straight at me. "Money reveals character faster than time ever will. Protect her from herself if you can, but if you can't, let her fall." That sentence branded itself into me. For years, I kept my promise. I managed her trust fund with precision. I transferred exactly what Samantha needed, no more, no less. I told her grandmother's story as if it were her own. I even let Laura take credit for being a supportive mother. I was fine being invisible. I told myself that's what good fathers do, they give quietly so their children can stand taller. But sitting there that night, I wondered if my silence had become the reason she lost her soul. Guilt began to twist inside me, not for what I had done, but for what I hadn't. I had allowed her to forget the value of struggle. I had let her believe that luxury was normal. Maybe this entire mess was my fault. Maybe by protecting her, I had poisoned her. The jazz music faded into background noise as my thoughts spiraled deeper. I could feel my heartbeat sinking with the rhythm of the drums, slow, deliberate. I thought about every decision I had made in the name of love. The nights I'd worked past midnight crunching numbers for clients just to keep her tuition paid. The day I sold my car to cover her moving costs to Los Angeles. The morning I stood in line at the DMV for 3 hours to register a car she would later call embarrassing. I had given her everything except the one thing that mattered: humility. And now, watching her toast to her own brilliance, I felt something shift inside me. It wasn't rage, it wasn't bitterness, it was clarity. A calm that comes right before a storm when every emotion lines up perfectly like chess pieces ready to move. My eyes found Beatrice Monroe sitting 2 tables away. Her silver hair glowed under the soft light. She had been my mother's confidant for decades, and I could tell she was reading my thoughts. Beatrice had seen what Margaret had seen: the difference between being generous and being weak. She lifted her glass slightly, an unspoken message. "You know what to do." My hand brushed the edge of the leather portfolio at my feet. Inside were copies of every bank statement, every legal document, every line of truth they had conveniently forgotten. 127 payments. 127 acts of devotion disguised as transactions. That portfolio wasn't just paper, it was 10 years of silent love turned evidence. But I hesitated. My mother's words echoed again. Teach her gratitude even if it breaks her heart. Was I about to keep that promise or betray it? Was I about to save my daughter or destroy her? The line between justice and vengeance had never felt so thin. Then I remembered the night I found Laura's email, the one where she and Richard discussed transferring administrative control of Samantha's trust. They didn't know I saw it. They didn't know I was still the only one with signature authority. They had been planning this betrayal for months, rehearsing the smiles, the toasts, the speeches. I had been their silent audience funding their performance. And that's when I decided this would be the last show I ever financed. I stared at Samantha as she posed for another photo, her laughter echoing off the glass walls. For a moment, I saw her as a child again, Christmas morning, 7 years old, tearing open wrapping paper, shouting, "You're the best, Daddy." She'd been so full of life then. I'd give anything to go back to warn that version of her what entitlement would do. But life doesn't give refunds. It only gives receipts. The truth is, you can't buy gratitude, you can only lose it. I took a slow breath. The air tasted like pine and champagne. I realized I wasn't afraid anymore. Not of their judgment, not of their laughter. Fear had kept me quiet for too long, and tonight silence would no longer mean surrender. It would mean strategy. I closed my eyes for a moment, imagining Margaret's voice one last time. When love is taken for granted, the only cure is truth. When I opened them again, Beatrice was still watching. Her eyes told me everything. It was time. I straightened my jacket, lifted my glass, and smiled. The performance was still going, but I was already rewriting the ending. That night, surrounded by luxury and lies, my heart was no longer broken. It was awakening. Every scar turned into armor, every regret into resolve. I wasn't just a father anymore. I was the keeper of truth, and truth, when revealed at the right time, is the most elegant revenge of all. Revenge, when done right, is never loud. It's methodical, patient, and precise, like accounting for every cent someone never thanked you for. That night, while the laughter at the country club still echoed in my head, I drove home in silence. My 2011 Honda hummed through the empty streets of Scottsdale, the same car Samantha once mocked as embarrassing. I didn't feel embarrassed anymore. I felt awake. Beneath the quiet, a plan was already forming, not out of rage, but out of clarity. When I reached my apartment, the one everyone assumed I rented, I unlocked the small office behind the kitchen. On the wall hung a framed photo of my mother, Margaret Stone, the woman whose wisdom had funded this entire illusion. Her eyes seemed to follow me as I powered on my laptop. The wealth management portal loaded numbers glowing across the dark screen. $8, $327, $49. The Stone Family Trust. My mother's legacy, my responsibility, and for 10 years, my burden of silence. The first step in every plan is truth. So I began collecting it. I opened my private folders, years of bank statements, transaction logs, credit card summaries. Each line item told a story. Samantha's apartment rent, her BMW payments, tuition deposits, even the luxury gym she claimed was sponsored. 127 months, $12,000 every month, $1.5 million in total. Every dollar matched perfectly with her so-called self-made milestones. Every lie she told was traceable, verifiable, undeniable. Then I started connecting the bigger pieces. I printed copies of Richard Coleman's financial filings, public records from his 3-car dealerships. 2 were running losses, the third barely breaking even. Yet he'd been flaunting wealth at every event, gifting Samantha jewelry worth more than his monthly profits. The math didn't add up. My instincts told me there was more. Maybe mismanagement, maybe debt, maybe fraud. Laura's emails confirmed it. I still had access to our shared cloud folder from years ago. Out of habit, she never changed her credentials. Inside, a thread titled Trust Admin Consolidation Proposal caught my attention. I clicked. The file outlined her and Richard's plan to petition a court for reallocation of trustee privileges, my privileges. They were going to argue that I was mentally unfit to manage financial instruments responsibly. I scrolled further. Attached were drafts of character statements, all written by Richard, but signed with Laura's name. He's emotionally unstable after unemployment, refuses to cooperate with family financial planning, neglectful of his own well-being. The words burned like acid. It wasn't just betrayal. It was strategy, their strategy to erase me. I printed everything. Then I opened another folder labeled Eleanor Correspondence. Inside were scanned letters from Beatrice Monroe, my mother's closest friend, and the second witness to her will. She had warned me before. Laura's husband has been asking questions about the trust structure. Be cautious. Beatrice knew something was coming long before I did. I called her the next morning. Bea, I said softly, it's time. Her voice carried that familiar blend of calm and steel. I was wondering when you'd say that. Your mother always knew this day would come. She called it the reckoning. What do you need from me? Verification, I replied. And presence. Then I'll be there. Friday evening. The gala dinner. Yes. You'll know when to step in. That night I began assembling the evidence, a portfolio of truth. Financial statements, trust documents, correspondence, inheritance records, and authorization letters from First National Private Wealth Management. Each page was marked, labeled, and bound. The same portfolio I'd carried to the Christmas party, now armed for battle. But this wasn't about humiliation. It was about balance, moral accounting. Every lie had to reconcile with the truth. Every betrayal had to meet its ledger. I reviewed the trust deed again, line by line. Section 4, the trustee shall have sole discretion over all distributions. and may revoke them upon evidence of ingratitude, entitlement, or disrespect. Section 6. The trustee shall act not as benefactor, but as educator, ensuring that the wealth entrusted builds character, not vanity. I smiled. My mother had written that clause specifically for Samantha. She had seen this coming long before I did. In the following days, I ran silent checks. I met with Patricia Owens, my wealth advisor, under the pretext of reviewing quarterly performance. In reality, I was testing her confidentiality. Patricia, I said casually, if someone, let's say my daughter or her stepfather, requested information about the trust, what would happen? She smiled professionally. They'd be denied, Mr. Stone. Only the trustee of record can access these accounts. That's you. And if they filed a legal petition, then the court would contact us for verification. But with your documentation, there's no question. You are the sole fiduciary authority. Perfect. The walls of their scheme were already cracking, they just didn't know it yet. By Thursday, I had rehearsed every move. The timing of the reveal, the tone of my voice, the order of the documents. The key was calmness. Real power doesn't shout, it signs papers. Friday came. I dressed in a simple black suit, no designer label, no pretense. I drove my Honda to the same country club that had humiliated me days before. As I handed my keys to the valet, I caught sight of Richard's Porsche gleaming under the lights. Fitting, I thought. Let the man arrive in luxury, he'd be leaving in ruins. Inside, the ballroom was decked in red and gold. Samantha floated through the crowd, radiant and oblivious. Laura was at her side, smiling for cameras. To everyone else, they were the perfect family. To me, they were defendants about to face evidence. Beatrice arrived quietly, taking a seat 2 tables away. Her presence deliberate but understated. When she nodded once, I knew everything was in place. The evening unfolded like the setup to a play. Toast, laughter, more hollow speeches. I stayed silent through it all. Hands folded over the leather portfolio resting on my lap. Because that's the thing about revenge, it doesn't need rage or chaos. It only needs truth delivered at the exact moment when lies are most comfortable. And when the time came, I'd open that portfolio, lay down every page, and let reality speak louder than any performance. My daughter would finally learn what independence really costs and who paid the bill. Every lie sounds believable until the truth walks into the room wearing calmness. The night of the gala dinner at Scottsdale Country Club felt colder than usual. Maybe it was the marble floors. Maybe it was the anticipation. I could feel it, the hum of tension beneath the Christmas jazz, the quiet arrogance floating through the air. Samantha, my daughter, was glowing under the chandeliers, again surrounded by admirers and pretending not to see me. Laura and Richard stood beside her, the perfect hosts of a life built on my silence. They thought the story was over, but I had just turned the final page. When Dr. Harrison, the club president, lifted his glass for a toast, Samantha interrupted. Before we continue, she said, her voice sweet with false humility, I want to thank the 2 people who taught me everything about success, my mother and my stepfather, Richard. Applause erupted. I saw heads nod, glasses raised. They showed me what responsibility, investment, and real leadership look like. She turned toward me with a smile sharpened into cruelty. And some people, she added, showed me what not to do. Laughter spread like wildfire across the room. That was the moment I felt the shift, the exact second when humiliation turned into power. I stood slowly smoothing the front of my black suit. The chatter faded. I didn't raise my voice. I didn't need to. My calmness did the work for me. You're right, Samantha, I said quietly. Tonight is about truth, and I think everyone deserves to know where it really lives. A hush fell over the table. Beatrice Monroe's eyes locked on mine. She knew this was the moment. I placed the leather portfolio on the table beside my wine glass. For those who don't know, I continued, my name is Gabriel Stone. And contrary to popular belief, I'm not the man who contributed nothing. I'm the trustee of the Stone Family Trust, the fund that has supported Samantha's lifestyle since she turned 18. The silence was absolute. Samantha laughed nervously. Dad, please. No, I said. Let's stay honest. For 127 months, that's 10 years, and 7 months, I've transferred $12,000 every single month to your accounts. Tuition, car payments, apartment, rent, credit cards, even that luxury gym membership you brag about online. Murmurs rippled through the crowd. Someone gasped. Dr. Harrison leaned forward. Wait what I pulled the first document from the folder, a certified statement from First National Private Wealth Management. I placed it flat on the table, the numbers printed in perfect clarity. Total distributions, $1.5 million. Principal account balance, $8.3 million. I slid the papers toward Beatrice. Verified and notarized. Would you confirm, Mrs. Monroe? Beatrice adjusted her glasses, scanned the seal, and nodded. Authentic, she said. Margaret Stone's signature, 2001. Laura's face drained of color. Gabriel, she whispered, what are you doing? What I should have done years ago, I replied. Telling the truth. Samantha stood shaking her head. This is insane. My trust fund came from Grandpa's estate, Mom's side. I reached into the folder again and pulled out the original will. Your grandfather left nothing but debts, Samantha. Your grandmother Margaret left the wealth to me with explicit instructions. I read aloud, to my grandson, Gabriel Stone, I entrust the full management of my estate to be distributed at his discretion to descendants who demonstrate gratitude, responsibility, and moral character. The words hung heavy in the air. Samantha's hands trembled. That can't be true. Oh, it's true, I said, pulling up my phone. Patricia Owens, my wealth manager, can confirm. I tapped the speaker icon. Patricia, good evening. Can you verify the status of the Victoria Correction, the Samantha Stone discretionary account? Her voice came through the speaker crisp and professional. Of course, Mr. Stone. The account currently holds approximately $3.2 million under your control as trustee. Monthly automatic distributions of $12,000 are scheduled for the 15th of each month. Gasps. Someone whispered, Oh my God. Samantha's face went pale. Patricia? Stop, I'm sorry, Patricia continued. Are you an authorized party? She's not, I interrupted. Go ahead and proceed with my request, Patricia. Certainly. How may I assist? I took a slow breath. My heartbeat was steady, my tone even. Effective, immediately freeze all discretionary distributions from the Samantha Stone subaccount. Cancel every automatic payment and authorization linked to it. Patricia's fingers clicked softly on the keyboard. Confirmed. BMW Financial Services, Desert Ridge Apartments. American Express State Farm Insurance, all canceled. The account holder will receive notifications shortly. Samantha's phone started buzzing in her clutch. One vibration, then another, then another. She looked down, confusion turning to horror. Payment declined. Rent declined. Credit card declined. Her voice cracked. Dad, please. I didn't flinch. You said earlier some people build value and others just exist. You were right, Samantha. Tonight you get to find out which one you are. The murmurs grew louder. Guests leaned in, whispering. Beatrice's expression was solemn but approving. Laura buried her face in her hands. Richard reached for Samantha's phone, scrolling frantically. This is temporary, right? You can reverse this. Not unless character changes, I said evenly. Section 4 clause. 2. Distributions may be permanently suspended upon demonstration of ingratitude or moral failure. That's your grandmother's rule, not mine. Samantha's tears spilled silently. You can't just cut me off. I didn't cut you off, I said, my voice softer now. You did. Dr. Harrison stood breaking the silence. Mr. Stone, I think we all owe you an apology. He turned toward the guests. I witnessed what was said to this man earlier tonight, and now we all see who's been carrying whom. For the first time, the applause wasn't for her. It was for me. Laura tried to recover her composure. Gabriel, please. You've made your point. I looked at her coldly. No, Laura. You made my point every time you let her believe that arrogance was strength. Richard stepped forward, face flushed. You're destroying your own family. No, I said, standing tall. I'm rebuilding it with truth as the foundation. Samantha's phone buzzed again. She didn't even look this time. She just stared at me with a mix of disbelief and fear. What happens now? She whispered. I leaned closer, my voice calm and final. Now you learn what independence really feels like, the same way I did by earning it. When I turned to leave, the room was silent. Even the music had stopped. The same people who laughed at me hours earlier now watched in awe as I walked past them, the leather portfolio under my arm. I didn't feel victorious. I felt something deeper, a quiet peace like balance had finally been restored. Behind me, I heard Beatrice say softly, almost to herself, "Margaret would be proud." And as I stepped out into the cold Arizona night, the doors closing behind me, I realized something my mother had known all along. Revenge isn't about punishment. It's about restoration. That night, I didn't destroy my daughter's life. I simply stopped paying for the illusion she'd mistaken for success. Silence has a strange echo. It doesn't vanish. It returns louder. The aftermath of that night unfolded like a slow-motion collapse, not explosive, but inevitable, like watching a tower sink under its own false weight. The next morning, Scottsdale woke up to whispers. The country club's marble halls, usually humming with self-importance, were now echoing one story: the Stone dinner. They said it in low voices at brunch tables, in business meetings, even in beauty salons. By noon, everyone knew. The once self-made Samantha Stone had been exposed as the daughter of the very man she humiliated. I spent that morning in silence. No champagne, no celebration, just black coffee sunlight on the kitchen counter and the distant hum of consequence. My phone buzzed nonstop, calls from unknown numbers, notifications, messages from old acquaintances, suddenly remembering I existed. I ignored them all. I'd had enough noise. I just watched the phone vibrate on the table, knowing that the world was rearranging itself outside, and that silence, my silence, had become the loudest thing in town. By midday, the tone of the calls changed. From curiosity to panic. Samantha first. Her voice cracked through the speaker like glass breaking. "Dad, please. They repossessed the car this morning. They said the payment bounced. The apartment manager says I owe 2 months' rent." I could hear the desperation in her breathing. I wanted to answer, to tell her it wasn't about punishment, but lessons. But I didn't pick up. Some truths can't be explained. They must be lived. Then came Laura. "Gabriel, this is cruel," she said on voicemail. "She's your daughter. She made a mistake. You're making her suffer." I replayed that sentence 3 times. "You're making her suffer." No, Laura. I simply stopped rescuing her from the consequences you helped her build. By Christmas Eve, Samantha's world had completely unraveled. Her credit card stopped working. Her BMW sat at a tow lot on the edge of town. Her insurance canceled automatically when the payment failed. The perfect Instagram life designer bags, candlelit dinners, hustle culture captions vanished overnight. The final post she made read, "Sometimes losing everything is how you find yourself." The irony was painful. It had 1 like, from Beatrice. Meanwhile, the phone kept buzzing with messages that revealed the hypocrisy of Scottsdale's social circles. "Gabriel, incredible composure last night." One text read, "We had no idea you were the real benefactor." Another said, "Would love to discuss potential partnerships. Your financial expertise is impressive." The same people who once looked through me like glass were now desperate to align themselves with me. Status had shifted. Truth, it turned out, was better PR than any performance. Dr. Harrison, the club president, called personally. "Mr. Stone, about last night, extraordinary dignity. We'd like you to consider joining the club's finance committee." I almost laughed. The man who could barely shake my hand a week ago was now inviting me to manage the very institution that had applauded my humiliation. I told him I'd think about it. Not because I wanted the position, but because power feels different when you've stopped wanting to use it. Samantha tried again 3 days later. Her messages were shorter now, more fragile. "Dad, please. I can't even buy groceries." Then another, "I'm sorry." Then finally, "I understand now." I didn't respond. Not yet. She needed time to hear her own words echo. On the 5th day, Laura's tone shifted too. "Gabriel, we should talk. Samantha hasn't left her room. She's not the same person." There was fear in her voice, the kind that comes when appearances stop protecting you. "Richard's dealerships are in trouble," she added quietly. "He took loans against them." I didn't know. Her mask was cracking too. Every false thing they'd built was collapsing in the same domino line. By New Year's Eve, the story had reached beyond the club. Local papers ran headlines: "Trust Fund, Truth Shocks, Scottsdale Elite." Someone had leaked the video snippets of Samantha's speech, my calm rebuttal, the moment her phone started buzzing. Millions watched. The comment sections turned brutal. "Spoiled rich girl gets reality check." Dad of the Year. Silence is power. The irony wasn't lost on me. 10 years of anonymity and my first moment of honesty became viral. But the real aftermath wasn't public, it was private. The calls stopped eventually. The silence that replaced them was heavier but purer. One evening, Beatrice called. "You've done what Margaret hoped you would," she said softly. "You taught her gratitude." I wasn't sure yet. Gratitude can't be forced. It has to grow in the ruins. Weeks passed. I focused on rebuilding my own life, consulting work, small investments, quiet evenings with books instead of regret. The peace felt earned. One morning in February, I opened my mail to find a handwritten letter. No return address, but I recognized the handwriting instantly. "Dad, I'm working now. It's not glamorous billing department 40 hours a week. I take the bus. It's humbling, but it's real. For the first time in my life, I understand what things cost, not just money, but effort. I'm sorry for every cruel word, every lie I told to protect my ego. You didn't humiliate me, you saved me. Thank you for the lesson, even if it broke me first." I folded the letter carefully and set it beside my mother's photo. Her eyes seemed to smile through the glass frame. The cycle had closed. Later that night, I called Patricia Owens. "Patricia," I said about the Samantha Stone account, "let's reinstate the distribution, partial this time, under review." She paused. "Understood, Mr. Stone." Conditions, I thought for a moment. Employment verification, monthly check-ins, gratitude reports, and keep it anonymous? Because this wasn't about revenge anymore. It was about restoration. That night, I poured a small glass of scotch and stepped onto my balcony. The city lights blinked below, indifferent and endless. Somewhere across town, my daughter was learning to stand on her own feet for the first time. Maybe she hated me. Maybe she finally understood me. Either way, I'd kept my promise to Margaret, teach her gratitude even if it breaks her heart. And as I stood there, the winter wind brushing against my face, I realized something I hadn't felt in years: peace. Not victory, not pride, just peace. Because the real revenge was never the freeze. The real revenge was watching the truth thaw slowly until it turned into understanding. Forgiveness doesn't always come wrapped in apologies. Sometimes it arrives quietly disguised as distance. 3 months had passed since that Christmas night, and silence had become the new rhythm of my life. No calls, no family dinners, no more polite pretense. The noise of wealth and reputation had vanished, leaving behind something I hadn't felt in years: peace, sharp and fragile like morning frost. I filled my days with simple routines: early walks before sunrise, black coffee, classical music humming softly through the apartment. Work came back too, consulting projects, small but steady. My reputation as a calm strategist had spread through the Scottsdale business circles. Ironically, the same people who once ignored me were now inviting me to mentorship luncheons and private advisory boards. It was almost comical. The invisible man had become the voice they wanted to hear. But even in quiet success, there was an emptiness that lingered. Late at night, I'd sit by the window, staring at the skyline, wondering how Samantha was doing. The part of me that was a father, not the trustee, not the avenger, still missed his daughter. I never said it aloud, but the silence carried it. Beatrice Monroe visited one afternoon. She was wearing her signature pearl earrings, a symbol of grace and subtle strength. "You've lost weight," she said, handing me a box of lemon cookies. "That means either you're happy or haunted." "Maybe both," I admitted. She smiled knowingly. "You did what Margaret asked. You showed her the truth." "But I broke her world in the process," I said quietly. Beatrice leaned forward. "Gabriel, sometimes breaking someone's illusion is the only way to save their soul." Her words stayed with me for days. One morning in late March, a plain envelope appeared in my mailbox. No sender's name. Inside was a folded piece of paper and a photograph. The paper was a letter written in Samantha's handwriting, shaky but deliberate. "Dad, I'm not asking for forgiveness. I'm earning it." Below it was a picture: Samantha standing outside a small community food bank, holding boxes of supplies. Her hair was pulled back, no makeup, just a sweatshirt and jeans. The caption on the back of the photo read, "New Beginnings Volunteer Shift, hour 12. I stared at that picture for a long time. The girl who once posted filtered selfies in five-star resorts was now stacking food cans for strangers. The transformation wasn't performative. It was real. Her eyes looked tired but finally honest. A week later, Beatrice called again. "She's been volunteering every weekend," she said softly. "The director there told me she never talks about the past, never complains, just works quietly." I didn't answer right away. My throat felt tight. "She's changing," Beatrice continued. "Not for attention, for herself." That night I pulled out the trust documents again. My mother's handwriting was still there. Her final note scribbled in the margin: "Teach her gratitude, then give her the chance to give back." It was time. The next morning I met with Patricia Owens at her office downtown. "Mr. Stone," she said, "how can I help you today? I'd like to modify the distribution structure for the Samantha Stone account," I told her. Patricia typed briskly. "To what extent reinstate partial distributions?" $1,000 monthly, I said, "directly to the food bank where she volunteers." "Anonymous. Label it as community development support. She doesn't need to know it's from me." Patricia paused, eyes softening. "You're sure you don't want her to know?" I smiled faintly. "This isn't about credit, it's about continuity." She nodded. "I'll handle it personally." As I walked out of the office, sunlight poured across the parking lot. For the first time, it didn't feel harsh. It felt deserved. Over the next month, word reached me indirectly from Beatrice, from neighbors, from whispers, in the same community that once adored the illusion. Samantha was still working full-time at the billing company, still volunteering weekends. She'd enrolled in evening classes for nonprofit management. The story had shifted. The girl who'd once been mocked online as the trust fund fraud was slowly earning a new title, the comeback daughter. I didn't call her. I didn't need to. Some relationships heal best when you stop forcing them to, but fate has its sense of timing. On a warm evening in early May, I stopped by the grocery store near my apartment. I was reaching for a carton of milk when I heard a familiar voice behind me. "Dad," I turned. She stood there, smaller, somehow thinner, holding a paper bag. There was no luxury handbag, no designer coat, just authenticity. Her eyes brimmed with both fear and hope. "I didn't expect to see you here," she said softly. "Life's funny like that," I replied. We stood in awkward silence for a moment. Then she said, "I got your letter." I frowned. "What letter?" "The food bank donation," she said. "They told me about the anonymous sponsor." But I knew. Only you would think to call it continuity. Her smile was faint, but it reached her eyes. I didn't respond. I just nodded. "Thank you," she whispered. "For the money, but mostly for stopping. You were right. I needed to lose everything to understand anything." I could feel something loosen in my chest. Not relief, something deeper. Forgiveness that didn't need to be spoken. As we stood there, two quiet people in the middle of a grocery aisle, the world felt strangely balanced again. She wasn't the same girl, and I wasn't the same father. Before she left, she said, "I'm saving up. I'll pay you back someday." I smiled. "Just pay it forward." She nodded, tears glinting. "I already am." That night I returned home and placed her photograph next to my mother's portrait. For the first time in years, I whispered aloud, "You were right, Mom. Gratitude isn't taught, it's discovered." Outside, the desert wind rustled softly through the palm trees. I realized then that revenge had quietly transformed into redemption. I didn't need her apology. I just needed her awakening. Because the real reconciliation wasn't between father and daughter. It was between truth and love finally existing in the same room again. And as the city lights blinked across Scottsdale, I raised my glass one last time, not to victory, but to peace earned through patience. The kind of peace that only silence can build. In the end, silence didn't destroy my family, it rebuilt it. Months after that night at the country club, the world stopped calling it revenge. They started calling it accountability. But I learned something deeper. The loudest victories are often the quietest ones. Not the kind you post about, not the kind you celebrate with applause, but the kind you feel when peace finally replaces noise. Samantha still works at the nonprofit now. She sends updates, occasionally photos of the children's center she's helping rebuild, handwritten thank you notes from families she's feeding. She never mentions the trust fund again, and I never bring it up. We talk about work, about the weather, about life. Sometimes that's all healing really is, ordinary conversations replacing years of blame. One evening, she stopped by with a box of cookies she'd baked herself. "They're not perfect," she said, smiling shyly. I took a bite. They were burnt at the edges, sweet in the middle. I told her they were perfect. And for the first time, she laughed like she used to when she was a child. That sound, unguarded free, was worth more than all the money in that frozen account. I looked at her and realized something I wish I had understood years ago. We don't lose people when we set boundaries. We lose the illusions that were never real. The moment I stopped trying to be her provider and became her mirror, she saw herself clearly for the first time. If you're listening to this right now, maybe you've been the silent one, the forgotten one, the giver who never got credit. Remember this? You don't have to scream to be powerful. You don't have to be cruel to be respected. You just have to stop funding the version of you that other people exploit. When I chose silence, I didn't choose weakness. I chose strategy. I chose peace over performance. And peace, my friend, is the most luxurious thing money can't buy. Now it's your turn. If this story made you think, if it touched something inside, you leave a comment and tell me where you're watching from. Maybe you've lived a version of this story. Maybe you're still writing yours. Share it below. Your truth might help someone else find theirs. And before you scroll away, save this video as a reminder that no matter who betrayed you, no matter what they took, you can still rise in silence. Hit subscribe. Join this community of people who turn pain into power, and remember, sometimes the greatest revenge is peace.